What if the worst thing that ever happened to you became the reason you succeed one day? Most people hate failure. They fear it, avoid it, and sometimes allow it to stop them completely. But what if failure isn't the opposite of success? What if it's actually part of the journey? Some of the most successful people in history failed repeatedly before achieving greatness. And honestly, many of them later said those failures were their greatest teachers. So grab your coffee, sit back, relax, and listen carefully until the end, because today's lesson might completely change the way you see failure forever. In this episode, you'll discover why failure makes people stronger, how setbacks build resilience, why successful people think differently about mistakes, and how failure can become one of your greatest advantages in life. Welcome back to Native Flow. Let's begin with lesson number 1. Why failure hurts more than we think. Lesson number 1. Why failure hurts more than we think. Let's be honest. Nobody enjoys failing. Nobody wakes up in the morning hoping to make mistakes. Nobody dreams about being rejected, losing, falling behind, or watching a plan collapse. Failure hurts. And honestly, it's supposed to. Because the human brain is designed to avoid pain. Now imagine you work on something for months. An exam, a business, a relationship, a project. You invest your time, your energy, your hope, and then it doesn't work. The disappointment can feel overwhelming. Why? Because failure doesn't just attack our plans. Sometimes it attacks our identity. We start asking painful questions. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? What if I never succeed? And honestly, these questions often hurt more than the failure itself. Now, here's something fascinating. The brain processes social rejection and failure in a surprisingly similar way to physical pain. Think about that. Your brain reacts strongly because thousands of years ago, being rejected by a group could threaten survival. Humans survived through cooperation, through belonging, through community. So when modern failure occurs, the brain often interprets it as a serious threat, even when it isn't. Now let's talk about school, because many people learn to fear failure very early in life. A wrong answer loses points. A bad grade creates embarrassment. Mistakes are often punished. Success is rewarded. Failure is discouraged. Over time, many people begin believing something dangerous. They begin believing that failure means they are failures, but those are not the same thing, not even close. Failing at something is an event. Being a failure is an identity. And honestly, confusing those two ideas has stopped countless people from reaching their potential. Now imagine a child learning to walk. The child falls again and again and again. Nobody says, maybe walking isn't for you. Nobody expects perfection. Failure is treated as part of learning. Yet as adults, many people forget this lesson. They expect immediate success, immediate confidence, immediate results. And when those things don't appear, they become discouraged. Now, here's one of the biggest problems. Many people experience one failure and immediately create a story around it. A business fails. I'm not entrepreneurial. A relationship ends. I'm not lovable. A presentation goes badly. I'm terrible at public speaking. One event becomes an entire identity. And honestly, that's where real damage begins. Because failure is temporary, but the stories we tell ourselves can last for years. Now let's think about some famous people. Many of the most successful individuals in history experienced enormous failures. Before success, before recognition, before achievement. Failure came first, again and again. The difference is simple. They treated failure as feedback, not as a final verdict. Now here's a powerful truth. Failure hurts because it challenges our expectations. We imagine one future. Reality gives us another. And the gap between those two things creates disappointment. But disappointment is not destruction. It's information. It's experience. It's growth in disguise. Now let's talk about strength, because most people think strength comes from winning. But honestly, real strength often comes from surviving difficult moments. Anybody can feel confident when everything is working. The true test comes when things fall apart, when plans fail, when progress stops, when life becomes difficult. That's where strength is built, not in comfort, but in struggle. Now, before we finish this lesson, I want you to remember something important. Failure hurts because you're human, but pain is not proof that you should stop. It's often proof that you're trying something meaningful. And honestly, many of the strongest people you'll ever meet became strong precisely because they failed, not because they avoided failure. Lesson number 2. Why successful people think differently about failure. Now let's talk about something that separates successful people from everyone else. It's not intelligence. It's not talent. It's not luck. And honestly, it's not even hard work alone. It's the way they interpret failure, because two people can experience the exact same setback and walk away with completely different futures. Now imagine two entrepreneurs. Both launch a business, both fail, both lose money, both feel disappointed. The event is identical, but their interpretations are completely different. The first person says, "I failed. Maybe I'm not cut out for this." The second person says, "Interesting. What can I learn from this?" One person sees failure as evidence. The other sees failure as education. And honestly, that difference changes everything. Now here's something fascinating. Most successful people don't have fewer failures, they often have more, much more. The difference is that they don't stop after failing. Think about that. When we look at successful people, we usually see the final chapter, the achievement, the victory, the success story. What we don't see are the years of rejection, mistakes, setbacks, and failures that came before it. Now imagine watching only the last 5 minutes of a movie. You'd completely misunderstand the story. And honestly, that's exactly what happens when we compare ourselves to successful people. We see their success, but not their struggle. Now let's talk about Thomas Edison. When he was working on the light bulb, many experiments failed. Again, and again, and again. A reporter once asked him how it felt to fail so many times. According to the famous story, Edison replied, "I have not failed. I've just found thousands of ways that won't work." Now, whether the quote is perfectly accurate or not, the mindset behind it is powerful, because failure gave him information. Not defeat, information. Now, here's another interesting truth. Successful people often separate their identity from their results. This is incredibly important. They don't say, "I failed, therefore I'm a failure." They say, "The attempt failed." Notice the difference. The first statement attacks the person. The second statement evaluates the process. And honestly, that small distinction protects confidence. Now let's imagine you're learning English. You try speaking. You make mistakes. People don't understand everything you say. What happens next? An unsuccessful mindset says, "I'm bad at English." A successful mindset says, I'm learning English. Same event, different interpretation, different future. Now, here's something that surprises many people. Failure often reveals information that success hides. When everything works, we don't always analyze deeply. But when something fails, we pay attention, we investigate, we improve, we adapt. And honestly, some of life's most valuable lessons arrive disguised as disappointments. Now let's talk about resilience. Because resilience is not something people are born with. It's something they build. And failure is one of its greatest teachers. Imagine lifting weights at the gym. The muscle becomes stronger because it experiences resistance. Without resistance, growth doesn't happen. The mind works similarly. Challenges create strength. Struggles create resilience. Failures create wisdom. Now here's a powerful question. What if failure isn't a stop sign? What if it's a direction sign? What if it's not saying, give up? What if it's saying, try a different approach? Honestly, many breakthroughs happen only after people stop treating failure as the end. Now let's look at another trap. Many people quit too early. Not because success is impossible, but because failure feels personal. They experience one setback and assume the journey is over. Meanwhile, the people who eventually succeed often keep going long enough to learn what others never learn. And honestly, persistence is an underrated superpower. Now, before we finish this lesson, I want you to remember something important. Failure does not decide your future. Your response to failure does. Because every successful person eventually faces the same choice. Use failure as an excuse to stop, or use it as a lesson to grow. And honestly, that choice often determines everything that comes next. Lesson number 3, how failure builds mental strength and resilience. Now let's talk about something failure gives us that success rarely can. Mental strength. Because honestly, success feels good, but failure changes you. Success celebrates what you already know. Failure forces you to grow. And that's a huge difference. Now imagine two people. The first person has never faced a serious challenge. Everything has gone according to plan. Everything has been comfortable. Everything has been easy. The second person has experienced setbacks, rejections, disappointments, and difficult moments. Who do you think is better prepared for life's future challenges? Usually the second person. Why? Because struggle teaches lessons that comfort cannot. Now here's something fascinating. Psychologists often talk about resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover after difficulties, to get back up after being knocked down, to continue moving forward despite obstacles. And honestly, resilience is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop, because life will never be completely free of problems. Challenges are inevitable. Disappointments are inevitable. Unexpected setbacks are inevitable. The question isn't whether difficulties will come. The question is, how will you respond when they do? Now imagine a tree growing in a completely protected environment. No wind, no storms, no resistance. At first, that sounds ideal. But without resistance, the tree may actually become weaker. Trees develop stronger roots when they face challenges. Humans often do too. Now, let's talk about confidence again. Because many people think confidence comes from success. But honestly, some of the deepest confidence comes from surviving failure. Think about it. When you've experienced setbacks and recovered, you begin trusting yourself differently. You realize, I've handled difficult situations before. I can handle them again. That realization is powerful because confidence is not believing nothing will go wrong. It's believing you can handle things when they do. Now, here's another important lesson. Failure teaches emotional control. Imagine everything goes perfectly in your life. You never lose, never struggle, never experience disappointment. How would you learn patience? How would you learn perseverance? How would you learn emotional strength? Honestly, many of those qualities only develop under pressure. Now let's look at athletes. Every great athlete loses. Every champion experiences defeat. Every successful competitor faces setbacks. The difference is that they learn from those moments. They study them, adapt, improve, and return stronger. If they quit after every loss, they would never become champions. Now, here's something many people misunderstand. Resilience doesn't mean you never feel pain. It doesn't mean you never feel discouraged. It doesn't mean you never feel disappointed. It means you keep moving despite those feelings. And honestly, that's what makes resilience so powerful. Now imagine two students learning English. The first makes mistakes and feels embarrassed, so they stop speaking. The second makes mistakes and feels embarrassed too, but they continue speaking. One avoids discomfort, the other grows through discomfort. A year later, their results may be dramatically different, not because one was smarter, but because one was willing to keep going. Now, here's a fascinating truth. Many of the strongest people you admire today were not born strong. They became strong through challenges, through failures, through difficult experiences they never wanted. The strength came later, as a result of the struggle, not before it. Now let's talk about fear, because failure changes our relationship with fear. Before failing, many people imagine failure as something catastrophic, something unbearable, something that will destroy them. Then failure happens, and they survive. Life continues. The world doesn't end. And honestly, that realization can be incredibly freeing, because once you've survived failure, it becomes less frightening. You realize you're stronger than you thought. Now, before we finish this lesson, I want you to remember something important. Failure doesn't make people stronger automatically. Some people become bitter. Some people quit. Some people refuse to learn. Strength comes from how you respond, because every failure offers two opportunities: the opportunity to give up or the opportunity to grow. And honestly, the strongest people consistently choose growth. Lesson number 4. Why failure is often the beginning of success. Let's imagine something. What if every successful person quit after their first major failure? No great companies, no great inventions, no great achievements, no inspiring success stories. Why? Because almost every meaningful success story contains failure somewhere near the beginning. And honestly, that's one of the biggest secrets people rarely talk about. We love success stories, but we often skip the failures that made them possible. Now think about a building. Before workers construct the upper floors, they spend a huge amount of time building the foundation. The foundation is invisible. Nobody takes pictures of it. Nobody celebrates it. But without it, the building collapses. Failure often works the same way. It's the invisible foundation of future success. Now, here's something fascinating. Many successful people later describe their biggest failures as turning points, not because they enjoyed them, not because they wanted them, but because those failures forced them to change, to improve, to rethink their approach. And honestly, growth often begins the moment our old strategy stops working. Now imagine someone trying to start a business. The first idea fails. They learn about customers, marketing, communication, money management. Then they try again. The second attempt fails too. They learn even more. By the third or fourth attempt, they possess knowledge they never would have gained through success alone. Now here's the irony. The person who appears successful today may actually be standing on a mountain of past failures. You simply don't see them. Now, let's talk about mistakes. Because many people waste failures. Yes, waste them. A failure only becomes valuable if you learn something from it. Imagine touching a hot stove. You get burned. The experience hurts, but you learn something useful. If you touch the same hot stove every day without learning, the pain becomes meaningless. And honestly, life works the same way. Failure teaches, but only if we're willing to listen. Now here's another important truth. Success often requires adaptation. The world changes. People change, circumstances change, and sometimes the strategy that worked yesterday doesn't work today. Failure forces adaptation. It pushes people out of comfortable habits. It demands growth. And honestly, many breakthroughs happen only because failure made the old approach impossible. Now think about learning English. Imagine someone speaks for the first time and makes mistakes. If they quit, the failure becomes the end of the story. But if they continue, the failure becomes part of the learning process. The exact same event can become either a wall or a stepping stone. The difference depends entirely on the response. Now here's something powerful. Failure reveals commitment. Because when things are easy, everyone is motivated, everyone is excited, everyone is confident. The real test comes when things become difficult. When results disappear, when progress slows, when frustration appears. That's when people discover how badly they truly want something. And honestly, many successful people succeeded because they stayed in the game longer than everyone else. Not because they never failed, but because they never let failure make the final decision. Now let's talk about perspective. Imagine looking at a single chapter of a book. You cannot understand the entire story. The same is true for life. A failure today may feel devastating, but you don't know what role it will play in your future. Many opportunities arrive because previous plans failed. Many successes emerge from unexpected setbacks. And honestly, life often makes more sense looking backward than looking forward. Now, here's the biggest lesson from this section. Failure is not always a sign that you're moving in the wrong direction. Sometimes it's proof that you're moving at all. Because people who never fail often avoid challenges, avoid risks, avoid growth, avoid opportunities. And honestly, that's a much bigger failure. Now, before we finish this lesson, I want you to remember something important. Success and failure are not opposites. They're often partners. Failure teaches the lessons. Success reveals the results. And many of the strongest, wisest, and most successful people in the world would never have reached their goals without first experiencing failure. Lesson number 5, the mindset shift that turns failure into strength. Now we've reached the most important lesson of this entire episode. Because failure alone does not make people stronger. Let me say that again. Failure alone does not make people stronger. Some people experience failure and become discouraged. Some become bitter. some give up completely. So what creates strength? The answer is mindset. The meaning you give to failure determines what failure gives back to you. Now imagine two people lose their jobs. The first person thinks, my life is over. Everything is ruined. I'll never recover. The second person thinks, this is painful. This is difficult. But what can I learn from this? Same event, different mindset, different future. And honestly, this is one of the most powerful truths in life. Events matter, but interpretations matter even more. Now here's something fascinating. Many successful people don't ask, why did this happen to me? Instead, they ask, what is this trying to teach me? That single question changes everything because it transforms failure from an enemy into a teacher. And honestly, teachers are often uncomfortable. The lessons we need most are rarely the easiest ones. Now, let's talk about identity, because this is where many people get stuck. After a failure, they stop saying, I experienced a failure, and start saying, I am a failure. That's dangerous, because failure is an event, not an identity. Imagine a baby learning to walk. The baby falls 100 times. Nobody says, this baby is a failure. Everyone understands that falling is part of learning, but somehow adults forget this lesson. They expect perfection from themselves. And when perfection doesn't appear, they become harsh critics. Now here's a mindset shift that can change your life. Instead of asking, did I succeed or fail? Ask, did I win or learn? Think about that. If you succeed, you win. If you fail, you learn. Either way, you gain something valuable. And honestly, this perspective makes failure far less frightening. Now let's imagine your future self, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Looking back at your life. What if the failure you're struggling with today becomes one of the most important moments of your journey? What if it teaches you something that success never could? What if it's preparing you for something bigger? The truth is, you don't know, and neither does anyone else. Now here's another powerful lesson. Strong people are not people who never fall. Strong people are people who keep standing up. Again, and again, and again, because resilience is not about avoiding failure. It's about refusing to stay down. Now let's talk about courage, because courage is often misunderstood. Many people think courage means feeling fearless. It doesn't. Courage means moving forward despite fear, despite uncertainty, despite previous failures. And honestly, every successful person you've ever admired had to do exactly that. Now here's the final truth. Failure is temporary. Growth is permanent. The pain eventually fades. The lesson often remains. The disappointment eventually passes. The strength often stays. And that's why failure creates strong people. Not because failure is enjoyable, not because failure is easy, but because the people who learn from it become wiser, more resilient, more adaptable, and more prepared for whatever comes next. Now, before we finish this episode, I want you to remember something important. Your failures do not define you. Your mistakes do not define you. Your setbacks do not define you. What defines you is what you do next. Because every failure places a question in front of you. Will this stop you? Or will this strengthen you? And honestly, that answer belongs entirely to you. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe to Native Flow for more English learning podcasts about motivation, psychology, success, personal growth, and life lessons. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember, Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who avoided failure. They're the ones who survived it.